Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of the AI Files. As you notice, I am not in my typical recording location, and Shadab is actually on vacation this week as well. So you've got me going through today's news in the AI world. We'll keep this one somewhat short. This is a holiday here in the US, actually recording this on July 5th, the day after July 4th. And if you celebrate here, hopefully, or if you are in the US, hopefully you did celebrate it and you had a fun and safe time with friends and family. So with that, we are going to talk about today's news, or at least what happened this week in the world of the AI. And we have a lot of topics, some new things coming from the different frontier models themselves. So just a quick teaser for the things that we will cover during this week, or at least for today's episode, covering the week. We've got frontier model gating. Well, we'll talk about what that is directly related to OpenAI's latest model 5.6 Sol. We've got shared safety systems. Anthropic brings in Fable 5 globally, but then also proposes some things for jailbreak-severity scoring and various different partners that have been participating in Glasswing. We'll also talk about enterprise agent interoperability, everything from how open source models are being used to the latest models, and then also where we're seeing enterprises adopt A2A or agent to agent. We'll also talk about AI for science, how new endeavors are actually underway to leverage AI really for good, for the things that we all hope for as a society to be used. Then we'll cover infrastructure as a strategy. To me, this is one that's really changing the way that either enterprise should work or think about work. And then we'll get into agent trust. So all that and more, stay tuned for episode 106 of the AI Files.
Greetings. Welcome to the AI Files podcast. If you're looking to stay up to date on the AI, this is the podcast for you. I'm Shadab Hussain. I'm the Director of AI at Microsoft, and I'm your co-host.
Hello, everybody. Jamie Basilico, as you know already. I'm the other co-host here for the AI Files. My day job is a data and AI technical specialist and architect. And as a reminder, please note this is not an official Microsoft channel, so the views and opinions expressed by myself and Shadab are our own and do not represent the views of Microsoft. Welcome, everybody. We'll get into the heart of things now. We'll first start out with the quote of the week, as we typically do, or business impact. So this week we had Nathan Benach. I don't know if I'm spelling his last name correctly, but his quote is, "The most advanced AI is built by a handful of American companies on American soil under American law. And what the rest of us are permitted to do with it can change on a Friday afternoon." So this comes in response to, obviously, we've heard things around the Anthropic models with Mythos and how the government kind of stepped in there, and especially with the release of Fable and that being pulled out. But his point of it is that, yes, we have these models returning, like with Fable 5 shortly. Depending on when you'll actually listen to this, may already be out in a while. But let's give some context around this. So Nathan is actually an AI investor at a London-based Air Street Capital. And he made this comment to the Financial Times in a MIT Technology Review, which highlighted on June 26th that while he's been looking at and covering some of the things within the Trump administration, it's been reported that OpenAI itself is going to be limited in the initial drop of GPT-5.6 release, specifically on Sol, which we'll talk a little about later. But this quote landed in the news cycle at the same time that Anthropic's Mythos and Phobos is set to be re-released as limited preview plan. So it matters because it captures the geopolitical reality now sitting underneath every enterprise's AI roadmap, meaning that if a frontier model access can be restricted by a government request, either for the reason of export control directives or trusted partner status, or even just by a customer approval, then AI adoption is just not a technical or a procurement decision. It's actually a sovereign resilience and contingency planning decision that most large enterprises need to actually think about now. So, that this is something you'll see as a recurring theme as we go through this week's episode because of some of these new things that are being released. But this really, again, talks to what every large enterprise really needs to think about in today's world and the way that models may be curtailed by governments. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this. I'm calling it this frontier model gatekeeping. And again, very relevant to what I just had mentioned. So OpenAI itself has put out a new model. That's GPT-5.6, and it comes in a couple of different flavors, which I'll talk about later. But their most discerning or most capable model is Sol, S-O-L, not out of luck, if you know what I meant. So this model is very good. I mean, you could argue it's on par with Mythos and its capabilities, but the bottom line is there's more scrutiny that's coming in with these models now. So OpenAI definitely has been touting this as their next generation model with stronger coding, science, cybersecurity capabilities, and paired with OpenAI's most stringent safety stack. What does that sound familiar? Sounds just like what Anthropic had released and was touting with Mythos. So the big story here is access. So there are a couple of different sources, The Verge and TechCrunch, have been citing that the plans for release of 5.6 was actually done for a select group of enterprise customers after the Trump administration actually made that request. So Sam Altman reportedly told staff that the government would approve access customer by customer during the preview period and broader availability possible after a couple weeks later if the preview goes well. So, again, this sounds strangely familiar, after Fable 5 and Mythos shut down and Anthropic, working with the government and working with others to ensure that there's, an industry-wide framework for scoring, jailbreak-severity. And they've done that with Amazon, Microsoft, and Google and others that were working with the Glasswing project, which again was part of what Anthropic had put together for customers, early access customers, to try that. So the thing that's important here is, and I'll break this down into enterprise executives and technical listeners alike. But one for the executives is that these frontier models releases now involve government review, at least for the most capable ones. So that's going to have impact on phased access, who's got eligibility to actually even use these. So enterprises should be planning for model access volatility, including, not only delayed launches, but restrictions by region, and maybe, should consider fallback providers. So, this whole safety governance is shifting from a voluntary company policy towards something that's more or less like shared frameworks and government involvement. And as a technical listener, you should think about this because you need to build and construct things in abstracted layers, potentially where applications could route across different models, especially if one gets pulled, and also have a strategy that actually has multiple providers in it. When we also think about like the cyber and science capabilities, they're certainly becoming specific triggers for enhanced evaluation and release control. So you should actually consider that while you're building. And then jailbreak security scoring is becoming a bigger part of red teaming, how you look at model cards and just come up with, enterprise level model approval workflows. So the big picture is very clear in this, is that, that although model launch days are changing in the way how things are rolled out, these most capable models may become, something that's negotiated during a deployment process, not just a public API switch. And that's the big takeaway out of this one. So let's get into another news item, and this is about model choice and interoperability. So it's no longer where you're just building a simple chatbot. You're doing you're building agents that actually can speak and take on activities and communicate with other agents within an organization. So there's things that have been afoot, and I'll call this really agent interoperability and model choice that's out there. So 3 separate things, but they all kind of interrelate. So one, Claude Sonnet 5, that's the newest model. That's been announced a few days ago, and Microsoft announced that it's generally available within Microsoft Foundry. And that gives Azure customers a production path to Anthropic's latest Sonnet class model with Azure native authentication, billing, networking, governance, as well as data controls, and obviously Foundry agent integration. So this opens up, again, a more capable model going to the Sonnet 5 class directly within a Microsoft stack. All right, that's great. So let's talk about something else that is related to this. So Microsoft also confirmed a publishing of a technical guide for agent-to-agent communications, connecting Foundry and LangGraph together through the agent-to-agent protocol. So this shows an example of Foundry agents acting as an 808 client with a LangGraph agent that's running on on an agent-to-agent server on Azure Container Apps. There's also a small tutorial and directions on how to build these. So the important thing again here is that these agent ecosystems, it's not just one framework. They're multi-agent, multi-runtime, multi-provider that's supporting those things. And now, last thing in terms of like interop and model choice, AWS actually provided an offering inside of their US frontier open or within their capabilities to actually deliver models through Amazon Bedrock. And they're doing this within AWS GovCloud as well. So what is important here is that they're making available the GPT OSS, or the open source model, the 120 and the 20 billion model, plus NVIDIA Nemotron Nano, 9 billion, 128 or 12 billion, 30 billion, and the super 120 billion. So this release is all about data residency, public sector controls, and the ability to run these very capable models inside of a regulated cloud boundary. So this is just talking again about this interop and model choice and why it matters. It's really where you need to think about model choices just becoming part of a cloud platform strategy. It's not a separate vendor by vendor exercise. We could also think about regulated organizations increasingly want frontier and open weight models inside of existing billing environments. And this is really important as you start to think about the tokenomics. I mean, I think companies or individuals are waking up and realizing that, tokens are not free. And if there's ways to leverage these open weight models, running it on your own hardware, that's obviously an economically, I don't want to call it better, but it's a strategy potentially that you could actually use. So let's get into our next news topic for today, and that is science gets benchmarks and tools. So we've always known that these models are, increasingly getting better at the ability to do scientific work, especially in genomics, healthcare, things of that nature. So with this is that OpenAI actually introduced a GeneBench-Pro, which is a benchmarking for testing AI performance in genomics, biology, as well as scientific research using some complex real-world data sets. It also published inside GeneBench-Pro, which includes case studies, and also highlighted applied life science work to things such as, using GPT-5, helping an immunologist solve a 3-year-old mystery around immunology. Not to be outdone, but NVIDIA also announced BioNeMo, an agent toolkit coming to Claude Science, which is bringing accelerated AI tools to life science researchers. And this is really a push by them to include software for scientific discovery, with prior announcements that they made around Alchemy, Dockery, as well as AI for Science acceleration. Also, again, last thing here is that AWS has introduced a science-oriented implementation content, including something that they call Boltz Gen on SageMaker AI, and that's really for protein design. So it's a pattern. The pattern is that AI for Science is moving from a model can answer biology questions towards more specific, specialized benchmarks, agent toolkits, and microservices that these companies offer to be reproducible workflows that scientists can actually evaluate. And when you take a step back and think about why this matters, so AI for Science is becoming an operating stack, not just a breakthrough demo that looks cool to write a paper on. It also brings these benchmarks such as the GeneBench-Pro that could help separate real science utility from marketing claims. From a technical perspective, this is where science agents need domain tools. You need provenance. You need benchmark tests, and overall evaluation against expert reviewed data sets. And that's something that these are actually bringing. So let's get into another topic here, which is infrastructure as sovereignty. So, we heard of the things I just mentioned around the U.S. clamping down a little bit more on these latest models, especially the most capable ones. So this is where we start to think about how are the major players investing not only in the U.S. but elsewhere. So this is where we've got NVIDIA has investing in U.S. manufacturing supply chains, energy grids, and overall skilled workforces in the U.S. to provide and produce infrastructure needed for AI. So NVIDIA also published a companion story talking about inviting capital partners to power the AI infrastructure build out. But on the global side, and again, why is this important, is we need these frontier firms or whomever is actually building these to support AI models outside of the US. So this has been reported by TechCrunch that Amazon committed $13 billion to expand the cloud capacity in India, which we had talked about, in the last episode. And again, this is all about AWS powering data centers in Mumbai and Hyderabad to bring, further commitment to that region of the country. There's another side of this too, and this is really about, the model release sovereignty debate. Should countries and enterprises want access to these most capable models, but they want to do that in a way that either isn't inside of the US or want local infrastructure to be built out in the way that it could provide trusted supply chains and the ability to run those workloads under their own legal and operational requirements. And this is where we're now seeing this more and more, that AI infrastructure is tied to energy, chips, national investment programs, as well as data center geography location, and to some extent export policies, especially here in the U.S. So executives should be thinking about how they look at AI capacity planning. It's increasingly geopolitical. Where should their compute be? How should it be built? Not only from affecting costs, but latency, sovereignty, and resilience scenarios. Should they think about infrastructure commitments? Again, this is within large organizations as being long-term strategic bets, not just cloud region announcements, which I would argue that should be done, at least looking at it as these long-term strategic bets. And enterprises should track compute concentration as a risk in the same way they think about tracking supply chain or currency risk. Again, it's just bringing in more scrutiny and ways that large enterprises should think about what is this big picture as far as an AI race. It's no longer just these a model versus model. It's about factories, grids, chips, and the financing, the cloud that is powering all that. And it really comes down to how is this impacting your business and what you could rely on. All right, let's go into some rapid news items here. So ChatGPT adoption keeps spreading globally. So OpenAI published the new signals data showing ChatGPT, the adoption growing globally. This is interesting because it shows a little bit of a dichotomy between, yes, we're seeing more and more capabilities with these models, whether or not, it's like I said, the GPT 5.6 Sol, which I'll get into a little bit more, but we're now seeing this surge of, you can kind of separate out like what is the mass market assistance becoming ordinary, which in this case, again, it's what is everybody using versus the frontier systems that are becoming more gated and more strategic from an organization standpoint. But again, the train keeps on rolling. We're seeing ChatGPT just get more and more users. Next is OpenAI maps Europe's worldwide force opportunity. So they released a report that shows how AI could reshape jobs across the EU, highlighting occupations that may face automation growth and workflow changes. Again, doesn't seem dissimilar to what many have been talking about here in the US as well. But this continues OpenAI's broader policy positioning around productivity, labor transition, and shared economic benefit. So this, the executive angle here is all about workforce planning. Companies should move beyond, AI will change jobs. Of course it will. They need to think about how to start mapping a role level exposure, doing task redesign and reskilling paths for their existing employees, as well as those future employees into their organization. Next here is Patronus raises $50 million for this agent stress test worlds. We had talked about this again previously, but again, it's making a little bit more waves. This is where, digital worlds for evaluating agents. And this is where they can start to think about, the idea is actually creating, strategic static tests from this interactive environments where, there could be found shortcuts or hidden failures or long horizon task errors that can be exposed. And that's the whole idea of, the continuity around doing these agent stress tests based upon test worlds. So next on this, somewhat related, is how the world actually thinks about testing or eval results. So Hugging Face adds community eval results to these model pages. I don't know about you. When I go out to Hugging Faces, I do look at what is this what is this model. So Hugging Face now is going to, what they're putting is every eval ever results being surfaced on that Hugging Face page. So this makes external evaluation more visible at the point where developers can actually choose their model. So I'd say it's a small, but it's an important infrastructure or step around infrastructure. As model choice explodes, it's like, what are you thinking about to help you evaluate the context around what is comparable or easy to inspect? So that's available to everybody. Memory poisoning playbook. So Microsoft published guidance on defending Microsoft Foundry agent service, at least in their memory, against memory poisoning. So this post actually explains how agent memory could be extracted, consolidated in storage, and retrieval would create new security boundaries if attackers can influence the durable memory. So, the takeaway on this one is that long-term memory is not just a UX feature. It's something that's persistent state and needs threat modeling around that, which is going to be more and more important as more and more agents are developed by companies. So let's get into some of these launches. I had alluded to already multiple times of GPT 5.6 Sol. So this is, previewed. It's described by OpenAI as their next generation model with stronger coding, science, cybersecurity capabilities, and their most advanced safety stack to date. Obviously, this, the importance on this one is it reinforces cyber and scientific capabilities that are now central to these frontier labs that are how they're positioning their top models, which again talks to all the things that we mentioned earlier during this episode around the government scrutiny. But Sol is not the only model. By the way, if you haven't noticed, they put code names. I don't know if this is actually like the real ones, because I'm used to GPT-Pro, GPT-5, and then GPT Mini and Nano. So they're going now with Sol, Terra, and Luna. So Sol is their flagship model. And again, like I said, that's for cyber and science and in-depth or most sophisticated coding. Terra is their it's their capable model, but just low cost options. I kind of treat this as, is this mini? Maybe, we'll see what that is. Luna is their the fastest model, most cost efficient as well. Benchmarks have been really good. Obviously, Sol outpaces GPT 5.5. It outpaces, at least on what they're saying, Fable. So, I think the proof is once a lot of people get their hands on these models, whether it's Fable or Fable and 5.6 Sol, that's when it would, people can actually test this out and report back on what's really real. I mentioned already about Claude Sonnet 5. So this is launched and it's available. This is, again, taking Anthropic's Sonnet 5 model, and developers can use it inside of the Foundry agent service, as well as then Microsoft IQ to build agents. And again, it's coupled with Azure native auth, billing, governance, networking, and various different data controls. So this makes Claude a first-class Azure model option, and it deepens the multi-model enterprise cloud platform on what is Microsoft Foundry. We could also look at next, which is the AWS GovCloud open weights model. As I stated before, this is something that AWS is supporting various different models. I won't belabor this one more. I'm just highlighting that, yes, it's available, but they've got the OSS 120 and 20 billion models, plus the NVIDIA models that are out there today. And again, model choice. You've got 6 different models here that are open weights. So there's a lot of benefit from an open weight model. As I said before, it's an equation, or part of the equation inside of token economics. So if you could drive costs down by not being charged per token and running it on, good inferencing hardware that provides decent latency, it's a real viable choice, especially for the fact that, when we think about what these these open weight models are capable of, it's basically in some cases, yeah, they're good at agent. There's certainly open weight models, by the way, that's outside of what I'm talking about here with AWS, but there's some open weight models that are really only maybe about 6 months to maybe 9 months behind the frontier firm best models. Equate it this way: like if you were able to run like GPT 4.1 and someone like a year ago said, "Here you go, it's free," you would be like, "Oh my God, that's great." So that's like, at least in some of these cases, like the GPT OSS models, they're like a GPT 4 class model that you could just run without being charged, at least not for the inferencing tokens. You still need to run it on some type of hardware, whether it's physical or virtual. All right, so next thing up is real-time voice with Gemma 4. So this is something where Hugging Face and Cerebus real-time voice with using Gemma 4. So this is really a partnership that Hugging Face announced to bring Gemma 4 to real-time voice AI. So this positions it where they're leveraging several different tools. So NVIDIA Parakeet for the recognition, which is speech to text. They're doing reasoning against that using Gemma 4. And then the output, which is text to speech, is using a Qwen model. So this is really a stack. I mean, it's not necessarily, in my opinion, what I would call speech to speech, where it's native within the model. You're doing several different hops to get what you want, but it's an open set of tools that allows every layer in this stack to be not only open, but as models progress, you could like literally interchange these different pieces. So again, it's an opportunity to do real-time voice. That again, you're skirting away from the tokenomics element of it. Another thing I'll bring up is ScarfBench. This is an enterprise Java migration agent. So IBM Research actually published ScarfBench on Hugging Face, which is again a benchmark for enterprises that are doing Java framework migration. So this targets a very practical and high value enterprise software modernization problem, which is how do I think about migrating my older applications and moving it together. So this is a evaluation which is moving into domain specific enterprise tasks, which is, hey, it's more than it compiles, but it's actually broader, part of a broader spectrum of things that can be done. And last but not least, on the launches, NVIDIA, again, you notice a theme on this. We're talking about infrastructure and science a lot on this week, but NVIDIA introduced something called BioNeMo. It's an agent toolkit for Claude Science. So this supports the ability to use Claude Science and basically giving life science researchers accelerated AI tools for scientific workflows. And the way I think about this, agents are becoming tool using systems, not just chat interfaces over biology papers. So again, NVIDIA giving a toolkit that can help advance things. So wrapping up then for today, a takeaway, the big picture out of this, I kind of wove in a lot of different stories this week, but it's about the institutionalization of AI. From governed launches by the U.S., coming up with standardized platforms, model choice, agent interop, how science is really benefiting from these models, both from talk a little about simulated worlds and benchmarks. That's something that I can understand that yes, this has been put through its test in real life scenarios, as well as then as we talked about sovereign compute, and that kind of speaks to the openness of the models and what's available to organizations, especially as they start to think about the economics and scale of these things. So AI as a controlled, governed, measured, capital intensive operating system for work, that's really the takeaway that you should all be thinking about from this week's episode. So with that, as we always say every week, thanks for listening. If you found this to make sense, please subscribe if you haven't, follow and tell all your friends. Again, we're on YouTube, Spotify, LinkedIn, and other areas or other ways that you can listen to the podcast, like Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts. So thanks again, everybody. Until next week, thanks for listening to the AI Files.